Good evening, happy Remembrance Day, and welcome to another edition of Business PNG. Papua New Guinea continues to experience steady economic growth that some economists term as strong and unprecedented. Despite this, the country continues to be burdened with high unemployment rates, unemployment so evident that most of us might ask whether the booming economy is actually benefiting the people. Earlier this month, the government organized a summit, the Medang SME Summit. Led by the Minister for Trade and Commerce, Richard Maru, the summit was aimed at addressing issues faced by Papua New Guinean small to medium enterprises. Participants called for the creation of policies that created an incubation space for PNG businesses to grow, especially with the fact that 90% of businesses in the country are under foreign control or ownership. Growing the country's SME sector could also tackle two key areas of concern: unemployment and poverty. Growing SMEs can also be seen as a way of generating wealth creation amongst ordinary citizens. As the Papua New Guinea economy records another year of steady growth, the challenges of providing social services and creating an environment where people and businesses thrive remains. Unprecedented revenue levels from mining and gas development and new opportunities mean there is an increased risk of wastage and missed opportunities. It is with this in mind that the government organized the SME Summit in Medang earlier this month.
This summit is about the strategy to create wealth for our citizens and employment. You are going to help the government tell us how, and we are going to get on and do it.
Over the last 10 years, the government has focused on the informal sector. It created laws protecting what it called cottage industries, but it provided little opportunity or avenues where those industries could grow into medium-sized enterprises. In the country's current state, over 2 million people, the productive labor force of Papua New Guinea are not engaged in the formal economy and are not being empowered enough to contribute to the national development aspirations. As well as the lack of opportunities, Papua New Guinea's growing economy is saddled by high unemployment and a steady flow of grade 12 school leavers, unskilled and unable to find employment in the formal sector.
This is a dual strategy by this government and championed by Honorable Richard Maru, saying we don't grow the SME sector to create wealth for Papua New Guineans, so that Papua New Guineans engage in business and they reinvest the profits that they make back into business in Papua New Guinea, rather than the foreign enterprises that come in and exploit most of the profits that they gain back to the foreign. And also that they are growing, providing employment opportunities for our young people. And I think this is a dual strategy approach for creating wealth creation, and for providing employment.
The SME concept tackles two key areas of concern: unemployment and poverty. The strategy looks at growing Papua New Guinean-owned small to medium-sized businesses and at the same time address the unemployment problem.
Employment, you saw our figures, there's a growing number of school leavers coming out of our education system. We need to provide employment for that. The PNG government, we've never thought about providing or strategies for providing employment.
But growing SMEs in Papua New Guinea is not going to be easy. With 90% of businesses in foreign ownership or foreign control, the question was, how were Papua New Guineans going to regain the lost ground?
If we were to do a survey of all the ownership of shops in town, it's 95% owned by Chinese. There are no Papua New Guinean businessmen in Medang town, let me tell you this. And it's a worrying sign for me as governor of Medang.
Well, Medang, past time through, all get all stores about inside the town, all get a sign take over. So, one plus something immediately by that impact all Madang, and by all this like an old trade stone, a kaiban or something, you must start working arrangement, or must go back or last place man.
The general sentiments at the summit was for a deliberate push for control and ownership through government policies and legislation. The government was already talking about ownership and control months before the SME summit. The idea was to create protection policies and an incubating space to allow for PNG businesses to grow.
We've had also, as part of the stock that looked at the business in this country, 10% of the formal economic sector is owned and controlled by Papua New Guineans, 90% by outsiders. We are reduced to mere spectators. We listen to international financial institutions and people like that to tell us what to do, and feel no sense of responsibility and guilt for the plight of our own people. How can Papua New Guineans compete with people who've been in business for 100 years, who know the trade, who've got substantial capital? We can't. We need an incubation space.
People feel that they are marginalized, that they see a lot of economic activity, but they're not engaged in it. In the business sector, we see a lot of large businesses and particularly in the LNG gas project with contracts going to a lot of overseas companies. And Papua New Guinean companies felt that they hadn't been given enough lead time to prepare in order to get the contracts that, or at least in joint venture partnerships with technical expertise and companies that had technical expertise with the local knowledge.
The concept of protectionist policies and incubating space isn't new in the region. Papua New Guinea has been drawing on Malaysian and Indonesian examples of SME growth. Malaysia's Bumiputra concept favored ethnic Malays over other ethnic groups. The SME summit was going to test the political will of the O'Neill Dion government. Its largely nationalist audience called for change and a path towards national empowerment. More from the SME summit when we return. A strong SME sector means a strong and a sustainable economy. This is definitely the case for Malaysia, a country which flourishes due to its flourishing SME sector. But for PNG, the question still remains: do we have the right key enablers for a strong and vibrant SME sector?
And if we have to pass a law now to make sure we secure better benefits for our people who are working.
While the nationalistic spirit was evident at the SME summit, many knew that much more than nationalism was needed in order for SMEs to flourish. One of the first things that was identified were the impediments to doing business in Papua New Guinea. If big businesses were complaining of high costs and the limited availability of land, the same impediments to small businesses were a major obstacle to growth. Alan Bird, a Medang-based businessman, shared his experiences.
Me looking me put restaurant business in Guanta. Mrs. Blomi am sitting on the backside. Me play been working on PNG restaurant. I been run lo Medang. All kata marang by clear lo this land. We ran it very well. To the point where all Asian house keke only struggle to compete with the Mibla. Okay? You go on a building, people renting no steamships, and steamships had to knock it down. So we didn't have a building to operate from. Now, Mibla too, ambulance minister sit down. Mrs. Blumi Blomarang, I grew up here. We cannot access land in town. We tried everything. We couldn't. Now Mibla operate 25 kilometers outside of town, no traditional ground, no land, no very good.
In Papua New Guinea, the limited land for business poses a major challenge. Much of the land is still held by customary landowners. For manufacturers, land is crucial for the establishment of new manufacturing enterprises, and land is scarce. President of the Manufacturers Council, Shay Scovell, says more land has to be made available and the cost of utilities must be reduced.
If the costs for doing business come down, it will help everybody. And I think nobody in the economy is hurt more than the high cost of doing business than those businesses that are already here paying those prices, in particular manufacturers. The land reforms, that will help all businesses, again, particularly manufacturers. Manufacturers, you know, it's a larger operation. You're not looking for 50 square metres of office space. you're looking for a hectare or several hectares or a few thousand square metres of land to build a factory.
Throughout the forum, Malaysian and Indonesian examples of low costs were brought up again and again. The investments into SMEs and the reforms to state-owned enterprises were highlighted as crucial strategies needed in Papua New Guinea to facilitate the reduction of costs.
We've got to have those essential services, access to utilities, essential services and the priority infrastructure to be available, affordable and reliable at competitive prices that comparative to the markets which we're competing against.
If it's serious about alleviating the high cost of doing business in PNG, addressing utilities, water, power, and so forth. So the message is quite clear, but I think the onus is on government. Papua New Guinea SME sector can do very little. They are stuck in its serious bottlenecks right across the country. Dilapidated infrastructure, for instance, Highlands Highway is falling apart. Utilities, water supply erratic, power disruptions frequently, and the cost of doing business, I think, as rightly pointed out this morning, is quite high in this country. So I think the challenges are real, but I think it needs government to be more proactive, and if they can take a decisive action in the 2014 budget.
Another obstacle for small businesses has been the limited access to credit to establish new businesses or to expand. For Papua New Guinean business without bank accounts or documents, getting credit can be next to impossible. On day 3 of the forum, the Prime Minister Peter O'Neill arrived to close the summit. At his welcome, Madang Governor Jim Cass presented him with a document called the Madang Declaration and Communique. The 21-point document contains strong recommendations for policy and legislative changes.
So today I want to tell many of the participants that we are now embarking on a number of reforms and changes that are now taking place in our country.
The recommendations focus on key areas of growing businesses, including a conscious suggestion for the government to include entrepreneurial training in the education curriculum.
I want to say that yes, that is a very good model that we can adopt. When the out-based education was introduced, and Father Jan was here with me, the chairman of that review, they've presented a very good report with very solid recommendations. And part of those recommendations include teaching our people more maths, more commerce, and all the other issues that relate to trying to develop them as a better citizen, better skill base for them to live their own lives. So yes, we will put that into the review of the curriculum for the new education system in the country.
The recommendations also challenge the role of state-owned enterprises and seeks a reform of their functions. The summit also called for a review of the banking and financial sector to reduce costs to small businesses. Additional funding of 200 million and 20 million kina are being sought for the National Development Bank and the People's Microbank respectively. And following the Malaysian example, 20 million kina has been recommended for the proposed Credit Guarantee Corporation. The legislative and policy changes are expected to go before Parliament before the end of the year. The funding suggested in the summit could also affect how the government plans for the 2014 budget. On the other side of the break, the need to free up more customary land for development. That's next. If you've just joined us, you're watching Business PNG. The topic of land issues in Papua New Guinea could mean so many things in a conversation, but for small to medium enterprises, acquiring land for development purposes can be quite a difficult task. As the economy grows, the need for more customary land also grows. However, land experts argue that unless land reforms are implemented, Papua New Guineans may not be able to participate in a growing economy.
As
the SME summit drew to a close, one of the big questions that remained was how the government was to bring down the cost of doing business in light of the fact that 80% of land still remains in customary hands. For years, customary landowners have been distrustful of any government move to register customary land portions or any process that would result in giving a state title over customary land.
It's good to see you guys. Nice and warm in Medan.
As the economy grows, landowners are being put under increasing pressure to free up land for development, but many remain skeptical, primarily because of instances of corruption within the Lands Department. Speaking at the summit, Lands Minister Benny Allen tried to dispel those doubts.
All this land, whether they are owned by non-citizens or Papua New Guineans, if they have not developed for more than 5 years, automatically it's forfeited back to state. And then make it available for people like you, the SME.
Taking into account the need for reform and the needs of small to medium businesses, the Lands Department has created a post within the Lands Department that handles customary land matters. The idea is to enable the smooth facilitation of the registration of customary land. According to the minister, the Lands Department's record-keeping system is being overhauled and modernized. The process is slow, and the government says it is confident that within a few years, land title information can be sourced using a computer network.
The system is very vital to the whole land management system in the department, as it will record all land transactions that take place over the portion of land. The system aims to minimize corruption and is also beneficial to state in terms of state revenue collection of land rentals and other fees and charges.
Shays Covell, the president of the Manufacturers Council, also raised the issue of land availability at the summit. While small businesses may be able to thrive, medium enterprises that involve manufacturing will still need large amounts of land, a commodity that is at present in short supply.
And if the land reforms can go some way to bringing down those prices, it will be positive.
Over the last 10 years, there has been a steady move to reform laws to enable the vast amount of land to be freed up for businesses. Some of the legislative and policy changes recommended have not been fully implemented. Papua New Guinean land experts argue that unless land reforms prescribed by government-sponsored studies are implemented, Papua New Guineans may not be able to participate in the growing economy. Don't go away. More on the other side of the break. With the SME Summit now concluded, what's next for government? Positive discriminatory policies? Review of the banking sector to reduce costs to small businesses? Perhaps land reforms? One thing for sure is that the government is totally behind growing and strengthening Papua New Guinean businesses.
It is our responsibility as a government to make sure that we provide incentives, good incentives for small to medium enterprises. And incentives, I just don't mean just tax incentives. We must be innovative in how we do it. And sometimes some businesses need to have government to participate in it. You know, governments to come in and support it rather than giving them grants, take up equity in businesses that Papua New Guineans do, and then get out of it when they are strong. We need to be innovative in providing the incentives like that. We also need to making sure that, as I said, keep the economy growing strong. That is the responsibility of government. We must create an economic opportunity for others by a strong economy. And I think so far we are doing well. And let me conclude today by again saying that our government, you will never find another government like this, I think in my lifetime, that is very strongly supporting SMEs in the country.
Justice Minister Karenga Kua at the summit states that the proposed protection policies are still within the framework and the boundaries of the Constitution.
Here we have a constitution that decrees that the government must move together with the people to help them support problem up, enable legislate acts of parliament, etc., that will facilitate for these people to rise. And that's what we are doing. We are constitutionally mandated to do what we are doing, and in the course of it we are running into conflict with our international treaties and obligations. However, it's exempted, it's allowed, because we can make out a case that we have a domestic constitutional obligation that's running into conflict with our international obligation. So we can bring ourselves into that exception. So I think that we should not be worried. Yes, those international treaties are there to provide a guide generally, but they must not be an impediment to us collectively moving forward in this direction.
Promising indeed for the country's SME sector. Unfortunately, time has caught up with us, however. Our talks on the Medang SME Summit continues next week when the PNG Business Council makes its stand on the Medang Declaration and the 21-point communique.
The answer perhaps is not conclusive, and the reason for that is we're targeting the wrong subject matter to address the problem. Business literacy is not given to foreign businesses exclusively. Business literacy is something that the government should put resources in to train our people.
I'm Denny Sorere, and I hope to see you again next week. Have a pleasant viewing. Bye for now.